Hey there and welcome. My name is Tina, and I teach people how to get into alignment with who they really are. I want to say a big thank you for being here. For those of you who watch, subscribe, and especially comment, it is greatly appreciated. If you are new to my channel, please understand these videos are not meant to put the famous or anyone on a pedestal or to condemn them in any way. This is an opportunity to look at them as spiritual beings having a human experience. And it gives me the opportunity to showcase one of the keys that I use to get people into alignment with their life, the soul contract. If you would like to know more about the history of the soul contract and how I put the charts together, I always put my short introductory video, and I'll put a link to that in the description box below. I connect with those who cross over energetically to bring through their messages. And this is not something that I can just do. We're all given talents that make this a possibility to connect with people who have crossed over to the other side. And you can do this through creative writing, meditation, or just honing your psychic abilities. Our loved ones who have crossed over are always ready to connect, and they love to send you signs to tell you that they're still supporting you from the other side. You just have to be open to receiving the messages. Today, I plan to show you the charts of Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie. They were able to guide me as to how the numbers in their chart related and what was basically happening in the breakdown of their relationship. Please be warned, we're going to talk about difficult situations and suicide. So please take care with how you are feeling. So first, let's pull up their soul contracts and get started in that aspect. So I will share my screen. And I will bring forward the soul contracts of Gabby and Brian. So to the left, you're going to see the charts as they sit on the Star of David. And then to the right, I have put their numbers. So on the right, I have here where I've aligned their numbers next to each other so that we can see how they related to one another as I go through and start talking about their relationship. On the left, at Gabby's chart, and then the right is Brian's, and you can tell by their pictures. And I did want to bring up a little bit of symbolism here because I'm very much into symbolism. Obviously, the people or our loved ones who have crossed over to the other sides will try to reach out to you through symbolism. And I thought it was very interesting how Gabby is standing here between these rock walls. I really get this impression that the walls at this time were closing in a little bit on her, and is reflective in this picture. And you can kind of still, she's still exuding this very positive energy, very sunny disposition that she carries. And then if you take a look at Brian's picture, you can see this very mountainous rock wall that he's building behind himself. And so we'll get a little bit into that. I wanted to just highlight that. Let us get into the energy of their contracts as we see them sitting here. The Star of David is about the two interlocking triangles. The upward facing triangle is our spiritual side of the chart, and the downward facing triangle is the physical side of our chart. So each spiritual side and physical side has the aspects of challenges, qualities, which I could also refer to as talents, and then our physical or spiritual drives. And so this is what gets us out of bed in the morning. And it is also, you could say it's a goal, a subconscious goal that we carry based on the energies that we chose. And if you combine all of the numbers together, you will see that we come up with an overall life purpose. And this is what we came here to, basically in an overall perspective, learn from this incarnation. But first, I'd like to set the stage and give you a brief description of the events as they had happened. So in August of 2021, Gabby Petito, she was only 22, was killed, all right, we should say murdered, by her fiance, Brian Laundrie, who was just a few years older than she was, 24. And he later took his own life by suicide. They were traveling together in a van, going on a journey across the United States, and they were planning to be gone for 4 months and began their journey on July 2nd of that year. Gabby was killed in late August, and her body was found on September 19th, thanks to the many witnesses that came forward. And she wanted to be sure to have me thank everyone for their support, because even after somebody crosses over, it's of the utmost importance for the truth to come out and for justice to be served, because this gives people the much needed closure and helps us to let go and to be able to move forward in our own lives. This particular case drew quite a bit of attention for several reasons. The first, because Gabby was documenting their trip on social media, doing some blogging, she was posting pictures, etc. There was some police video footage taken several days before the murder actually occurred, because of a 911 call placed by a witness that saw Brian hitting Gabby. More attention was drawn to the situation because of how Brian's family was handling the situation upon Brian's return. Now, he returned home driving Gabby's van without Gabby and refused to discuss her whereabouts with anyone, and they hired a lawyer to speak for them. And of course, this seemed extremely suspicious and very unsettling to anybody watching this case. I wanted to bring this case together and put it together for you to help us better understand why people come together to form this type of relationship at a soul contract level, especially one that can be very toxic and dangerous. It is something that I have experienced myself in my own life and some of my immediate family as well. Because these types of trauma-bonded relationships happen every day, the more we can learn about them, the more we can help others understand how to recognize, release, and grow from them. So I wanted to start with the two basic fundamental questions. What attracted them to each other, and what lessons were they supposed to learn from their relationship? Generally, when we form relationships that are very impactful to us, there is usually a prior life agreement. There is something that we're supposed to learn from the relationship, and the charts show us why these parties had become attracted to each other and how these charts could have worked to help each person grow in a positive way. Now, these can be any relationships we form, and intimate partners, friends, business associates. Gabby would have been attracted to Brian and vice versa, initially because based on their numbers. They had both had 5s in their chart. They both had the number 4 in their chart, and they both had the number 2 in their chart. Having similar numbers in each other's charts is an attractor because it gives us a feeling of being on a similar vibration. So, you know how you meet somebody and you feel just this immediate connection. It's a common resonance that you have. And it's basically because you're vibrating at the same level. So the other attractor that we see in charts is how we will initially be attracting somebody who has the qualities that we need to establish in ourselves. So if it's someone who's on their higher path of intention, and these can be coaches and mentors too, they will help us to grow and learn from the talents and qualities that we bring to the table in our charts. So again, it is about us learning and growing and sharing from each other. So let's talk about Gabby's chart here. And she has these 4s in her physical challenges, and this would bring a lack of self-confidence. She would have trouble assimilating information in her mind, and then this would bring her to not trust in herself and her intuition, lessons can take longer to learn when you have a 4 in a challenged position. She also had the 2 in her drives, which can be very emotional. She could be very reactive, and this can make her a little bit off balance. And I can see, though, why she would have been attracted to somebody like Brian, because Brian has the most powerful number you can have in your chart, these 9s, which is, like I said, is power. And he also has this 3, which we call a master number, and it brings forward a leadership quality. And so this, of course, would be something Gabby would be looking at, more self-confidence and exuding this leadership. Brian would also seem very in control of his emotions, and we know a little bit more about him now that that's an illusion, but the 11-2s and the 8s would have this very protective, paternal energy he would be exuding. So if Brian had been more on his higher path and in his true power, he could have shown Gabby how powerful she is and support her in her own intuition and be more trusting of herself and her decisions. The 11-2 would help Gabby be able to assimilate that information in her mind from the challenged 4, as it's all about structure and how you build things and how you can lay things out in an appropriate, logical manner. So the 12-3 also from Brian's chart would vibrate an energy of kind of this romantic, idealistic energy, which would be very much in alignment with Gabby's 14-5, which is bringing forth higher levels of consciousness, and also is about reflecting back parts of us that we learned from others. Now, because Brian was a dominant 5, and that's having 4 or more of the same number, he could have helped Gabby open up her own 5 here. It's more of this pioneering, and it also would have helped improve Gabby's writing and speaking skills. All of this could have helped Gabby bring out her gifts of service. Service souls usually have a 10-1 in them. And being that she was a dominant 7 and had 7s in her spiritual talents and in her life purpose, this would have been about helping her to bring out those gifts of serving others through living through her heart, which 7s are tied to the heart, and her heart's passion. And that's what she came here to do. Now, let's discuss why Brian would have been attracted to Gabby and what he could have learned from the relationship if he would have been more open and had learned some of his lessons earlier in life. She would have been very beloved and magnetic because of those dominant 7s I just mentioned. And she also would have had this radiation of spirit and of her own personal individuality, which comes from the 4 in her chart. And you can kind of see that in this picture here, I thought, of her. Because Brian is a dominant 5 and he's got 5s in his physical challenges, it's unusual to have this. And it means that Brian would have had trouble acclimating himself in society in prior life. So he came here in this life to really fit in and to learn and grow and find his place. Apparently that did not work out for him in this lifetime, because sometimes it takes a few lifetimes for us to break through some of these patterns. They can be very difficult, and none of this is easy, as we all know. Brian would have been very attracted to Gabby's intense passion from her 14-5, which is tied to the Scorpio energy, and he was of Scorpio himself, so he would have been drawn to that very intense energies that she exuded, and also the passion from her 7s. She had this beautiful 22 in her drives, which gave her this very adventurous, exploratory nature and being open to trying out new things. And so she would bring that in, which could have really helped Brian with this very challenged 12-3 and his spiritual challenges. This is a very tough number. And it's all about, the 12-3 is all about expanding and growing and finding balance. And she could have helped him do that as well. Gabby could have also taught him how to emotionally connect with others. She was very empathic and she could feel a lot of others' emotions. And him having this 8-8 here in his physical drives would have been something he was meant to learn, how to emotionally come into his body. For Brian, he was here to learn about the value of life, taking care of himself and protect others. That is what true power is from the 9s. And it was for him to learn about that power and to use it with great integrity. Now, so what happened here, and how did this relationship actually play out? Well, what we have here is what I'm going to refer to as the empath versus narcissistic relationship with a full narcissistic collapse. I am not diagnosing Gabby or Brian. I am not a licensed therapist or medical professional. I use the empath narcissist depiction because that wording, I think people really have an understanding. There's so much information out there about it. And it's my belief that everyone exhibits traits of both. I mean, if you're a healthy individual, you will oscillate between being empathic and narcissism because we have an ego. And so you fluctuate back and forth at times, but you always should be focusing on bringing yourself back into alignment. However, sometimes people get way out of balance and they're just not able to bring themselves back into balance. This is when the great distortion happens in our reality. And this is from being over-identified with the self and the mind and becoming infatuated with power and control. Please know that all soul contracts are first affected by what we are exposed to in our childhood, our parental figures, culture, etc. This has a great impact on how we grow and learn because it determines what beliefs we were imprinted with as a child and how much trauma we suffered during our early formative years. I am particularly interested in Brian's relationship with his mother because of the letter she wrote to him. We'll get more into that because this relationship would have been very formative for Brian. And there's a lot that has come out. This letter has been made public. There's a current lawsuit going on right now between the families because of that lack of support Gabby's family received from Brian's family after her disappearance. I mean, after all, right, Brian returned home with Gabby's van without her, and they immediately cut off all contact with Gabby's family, even though this was a person who was engaged to be married to their son, and actually she lived with them for a while. So this shows a very malignant and callous behavior towards a family who is obviously in distress over their loved one. So I think we can start to see the distortion on Brian's side already and starts to paint a picture of why he was the person we now know him to be. So this is a good example of someone exhibiting a good percentage of negative vibrations, which would be consistent, again, with somebody showing malignant narcissistic traits or some type of sociopathic or psychopathic mental disorder. Now, people who find themselves in this type of relationship understand that even very narcissistic people can first be very charming and come across as being very caring and loving. The first thing someone who is a distorted narcissist, what they do is they want to understand everything about you, everything, especially your weaknesses. Initially, this attention can seem to be very loving. And Gabby would have felt that she was being seen maybe for the first time. 7s here struggle being seen. They're meant to come out of hiding and show their true selves and their true personality. Brian, being a dominant 5, can bring with it very manipulative energy, especially where the truth is concerned, because he has this in his physical challenges. This would make him very psychic and be able to read people very well. So these 5s, for Gabby, it can be this great energy of being able to be very empathic towards others and feel what they're feeling, so you know where they're at, so you can be this real help for them. However, Brian was using it for a deep need for control and power. So unfortunately, that's the 2 side there of that 5. This distorted 5 would also make him very negative, impulsive, and reckless as well. The other energy that's very concerning in Brian's chart is this 12-3, which is all about expansion and growth. In this position, the distortion between the physical and the spiritual can be exaggerated. And I will talk more about that when we get the letter that his mother wrote him. The 12 can also carry this very heavy judgmental energy of others. You know, those people who they always talk bad about everyone, pointing out their flaws, just always in this kind of negative space. And so what this does for Brian is it causes a lot of blocked anger. So again, the 3 here in challenges is really about learning two-way communication. And because he has it in his challenges, this would make him not want to hear anything outside of his own belief system. So he would get very frustrated if Gabby was trying to express where she was coming from. He would have a really hard time hearing it, and it would make him very frustrated. The 3 is where we say the ego can get away with you. We used to call them egomaniacs, and now we refer to it as narcissism. And this being in challenge can unfortunately also lead to violence and improper use of force. This is a very difficult karma to overcome, and we don't make excuses for people. It doesn't condone any of his behavior. Any prior soul contract agreement between them would have been broken upon any type of abuse. No soul is ever meant to suffer in this way and to put up with it for someone else's growth. Brian is really working on his learning and his healing now that he is on the other side, and now that the veil's lifted, he completely understands his blame and all of this. And Gabby is on the other end of that, being very forgiving and loving and hoping now that they can share their story so that others can learn, so that they can help from the other side. And that's why they want to come through, regardless of whether you were the perpetrator or the victim. They want to come through. They want to share their stories so that people can learn from them. So we want to talk about this 11-2 in Brian's chart, because this is tied to life to death. So again, I talked about he was here to learn to value life. But if you're pulling in the negative side, you're not going to value life. And it's a little bit about flirting with danger as well. And that 2, again, we talked about in Gabby's, where it can make you quite emotionally unstable. It would also cloud Brian's judgment. This would really, and again, press on Gabby's 2 as well, make her feel emotionally unstable, as she would be picking up that energy, being such an empath from Brian. And this is why as empaths, it's very important for us to understand where our own boundaries exist and where others exist. It's very important to have that distinction and for us to learn that at a very young age. So conscious parenting is so important for children. This number, this 11, as we were just talking about in Brian's chart, would also make it very difficult for him to let go, especially letting go of things that he believes belong to him. And that is also another negative aspect of the 8. So between these 2, they can have trouble letting go, and that can be a person, because they start to have this distortion of feeling that someone belongs to them. That's very dangerous thinking. So the 8s were about Brian learning how to emotionally connect with others and coming into his body emotionally. Now, Brian was too much into the control manipulating from the 5s, the 12-3, and we'll get into the 4 here. So he wasn't really in his emotions. Now, 8s tend to keep their emotions in the brain and to the 5 senses. So you'll hear people talk about psychopaths as they're always looking to mimic people's emotions because they don't understand how to feel them. And this is very much the case for Brian. Now, they get very attached to the senses and how that power and what they're feeling through touch, sense, and smell. But this is different from your emotions, which come through the heart. And those are your higher emotions, which is love, compassion, empathy. So when you're just serving your own five senses, that's very egoic and very self-serving. So something Gabby would have been good at here, that 14-5 in her sevens, is opening her heart and connecting with people at an emotional level. So we wanted to talk about the 4 in Brian's chart, because the 4 in its most negative context can be a disregard for anyone and anything. This is very self-centered behavior. And basically, it's going to run on this concept of what is mine, and what is yours is mine. They can also show excessive pride and arrogance. Now, you can say, well, Gabby has this 4 in her challenges, which could also be some of the same vibrations, right? The negative vibrations. But what is different about Gabby is that she was the oldest and had 6 younger siblings. This was someone who was taught to share of herself early in life, which is something the 4s need to learn. And so she was super responsible. She was very much a part of her siblings and could share of herself very easily. She worked, and the super responsibility usually comes with being older and having to step up and help because you have so many younger siblings. And so she was somebody who worked 2 jobs to save up money for this trip. The van she purchased was in her name, and she had money to go on this trip. Now, someone who's in their lower intentions and serving the self-ego, like Brian, would have loved to have found somebody like Gabby, because they manipulate this generous radiation of spirit and her wanting to share all of these things that she loves. I got this feeling that she sensed that there was something very broken in Brian. Because when you have 7s in your chart, it's this very counselor energy, and people are drawn to you because you can help them with their problems. And they can activate great change in people. And this is another reason narcissists are drawn to them, is because of this. But what Brian was doing is he was working on the negative, her lack of trust in herself and her instability emotionally, because that gives him control. He wants her to think that she needs him because she's out of control, right? Narcissists want to make sure that everyone thinks that they are with the crazy one, that they're the hero, that they're the superior being and the intelligent one, and they're taking care of this very broken person. It's very interesting, this dynamic. And what happens with these people that are deep into the narcissism is this starts to escalate, because narcissists always implode from the inside out. It's just what happens. So again, that number 9, which is the most powerful number, and is all about learning how to use your power with great integrity. But at its most negative aspect, it is the destruction of people and of the self. So I think we can see what's happening here. Because 9s gives them the sense that they are superior over others, which is a distortion. Believing he's a supreme power and he has the right to control somebody else because he's on a higher level and he knows better, So now let's talk about what made Brian have this final narcissistic collapse, as it can be referred to. It would have been from Gabby starting to take her power back. She was waking up to seeing just how bad of a situation she was in. This came from the objectivity of the 7s, which pushed on this 2, which would make the clouds dissipate from that over emotional 2, and she could finally see what was really happening, the manipulation, what was really going on. Unfortunately, because narcissists don't want to hear the truth, but with Gabby, she would feel compelled with a 14-5 to speak her truth. And she did. She told Brian that she had enough of his behavior and that she was going to end the relationship with him. Her telling Brian about his faults would have caused him to fly into what would be considered a narcissistic rage. It's this fragile ego injury. Basically, it's like a 2-year-old temper tantrum. It's a rage, but it's not the rage that people don't know what they're doing. It's a rage built around intimidation, bullying, and trying to get somebody back into control. And they're very, very abusive in those rages. They actually take on a very demonic look. And from what I was getting from the energy that I was sharing was that Gabby ran. She knew this was very toxic and very dangerous. And at first I got this impression that he couldn't find her, and he did. And then he beat her because, again, it's all about getting her to submit to his will. And so in a narcissist's mind, once they know that you're going to discard them, they will discard you, whether that be trying to ruin your reputation in the public's eye. It can be physically discarding you, as Brian did. There were injuries to her head and neck from the beatings. He ended up strangling her, which is an exertion of power and control and taking out your life force. This is a person who is very revengeful. You won't give me your life, I will take it from you type of mentality. This, like I said, extremely dangerous people. And then for the next several days after they buried the body, kept texting Gabby's family to try not raise suspicions. It did, because it was kind of weird what he was doing. And then he drives her van back using her debit card along the way, of course, taking what doesn't really belong to him, but he doesn't see it that way, and going back to the person who is going to help him get out of this, which would be his mother. And I'm going to go into why I believe that she was part of this narcissistic collapse. So I'm going to talk about the letters, bringing in parts from the suicide letter. I'm not going to show that one. There's a lot to that one, but I'm going to show the letter from Brian's mother, which showcased their relationship. And it also shows signs of her severe narcissism and how she assisted in Brian's distortion of himself. Let me stop sharing now that we've gone through the numbers. And we're going to get to the share my screen again, and I am going to pull up this letter. We just don't normally get this much great information from a family, because narcissists, it's very secretive and it's very hidden, these family dynamics. So it's very rare that we get something as awesome as this letter. You can see this letter is just written on plain paper, and you can see it's a little bit all over the place. Kind of goes up and down and weaves back and forth. I'm not an expert in writing analysis, but I have had some training, and there's a lot of really good ones out there if you do get a chance to watch. They go through some of these, and I'm just going to give you my own personal, what I was getting from the energies of Gabby and Brian, and what I was getting off of this letter. So this is the letter Brian's mother had given to him, and she's claiming she wrote the note before Gabby's murder. It was my feeling that is not true, because there's a narrative she's trying to create here. So the way she writes, very up and down. So that's somebody who's, again, got a little bit instability going on, boundary issues, because again, she's all over the place. She goes up and then she comes down. And it is a little bit reflective in Brian's letter as well. And the one thing that stuck out between both of the letters was that the I is used a lot in these letters, because they're very egoic. It's all about me. And the I is always in pretty large proportion to the other letters for the most part. And that's, again, that inflated sense of ego and self. The letter is actually very incestuous sounding. And when I say that, I mean, it sounds more like they were lovers than mother and son. I'll read it to you here about that nothing can separate us and how much we love each other. She also states a burn after reading message on the front of the letter, which conveys that secretive type of relationship they have, which is very concerning and does point to a very unhealthy relationship. So if you can follow this, the typed version down here, because I can't really read her writing. She starts off, I just want you to remember, I will always love you, and I know you will always love me. You are my boy. And a lot of people that I had watched said, oh, this is fairly normal mother expressing her love. And I had a little bit different take on it because she says, I will always love you, which I would tell that to my children, of course. But I would not say to them, I know you will always love me. That's a little bit of this dictatorial. She's dictating that she knows he loves her. There was something that was a little off. And then she says, you are my boy, which is, again, a little bit to ownership. I don't refer to I can say my daughters, but I don't refer to them as my girls or my girl. I just don't. And I am not trying to read too much into it. But again, we know there's something a little off here because, again, it gets more obvious here. Nothing can make me stop loving you. Nothing will or could ever divide us, no matter what we do or where we go or what we say. We will always love each other. If you're in jail, I will bake a cake with a file in it. If you need to dispose of a body, I will bring, and then she had crossed off, show up with a shovel and garbage bags. If you fly to the moon, I will be watching the skies for your re-entry. If you say you hate my guts, I'll get new guts. Remember that love is a verb. And she goes into what love is. She says, remember that love is a verb, not a noun. It's not a thing. It's not word, it's actions. Love is actions. Watching people's actions to know if they love you, not their words. So again, she's creating this narrative. I love you more than anyone else because I'm telling you this by what actions I will take no matter what you do. So what this reminds me of when you talk about narcissistic dynamics, this is a narcissistic bonding situation we have going here. You will see this in mob families because there becomes this hierarchy structure. So again, this is very enmeshed familial patterning, and it's a very large red flag to those of you in new relationships because fully understanding the dynamics between the family of your potential partner is very important. Narcissistic parents live through their children and they don't see them as separate from themselves. Instead of being the parent who should be preparing the child to make themselves independent in the world, this type of parent makes it about a us versus them mentality. They undermine the child's independence. No one is more important than family, and even within that family. So the narcissist usually has a favorite child who becomes narcissistic. Severe narcissism can only see this hierarchy type of order, and everything is a competition to see where the measurement falls. So the game is to create this illusion that they're the best, and they want others to see them this way. They find fault with everyone else around them. Narcissistic bonding, that's what they're doing, him and his mother. And you can see it in friend groups and crime families, and even goes as far as when you have somebody who's a dictator of a country and then he surrounds himself with other narcissists because they do the bonding and put themselves in this hierarchy and everybody else gets oppressed. So they find fault with everyone around them, and it's really a false identity that they create together and hold on to, and nothing can get in the way of that. It's very fragile. And as she was saying in this letter, not even murder. So if this letter was written before Gabby's death, it's certainly planting a seed in Brian's mind. I think there's a lot of symbolism in here and some things he would have understood that others wouldn't have by the way she was wording things. So again, she was saying it's okay if you kill somebody because they don't match what her definition of love was, somebody who just does whatever you want them to do. Again, so she says it wasn't about Gabby. I just believe that was a lie. I think this is a mother who is trying to desperately hang on to this narcissistic bonded relationship. And she would have been creating the narrative and helping Brian to see how he should be viewing anyone else in his life. And so, again, I just wanted to talk about how people with their soul family, how sometimes it can be important to break away from them because of how toxic they can be. I find it interesting he never burned this letter because, again, this is bringing out the truth. And again, was this a subconscious anger thing against her for her trying to control his narrative as well, because he doesn't want her controlling his narrative. He wants to control his narrative. So this is when the narcissists start falling out amongst themselves. The final part of the letter is that she starts talking about angels and love and quotes from the Bible, this Bible verse, Romans 8:38, and references an extended version, which there wasn't anything. So this is all this very secretive, something's coded within this. But this clearly lays out how narcissists equate themselves to the highest order. They always reference Bible verses. They come through with the superior morality position, which brings us back to those nines in Brian's chart, this distortion of being the supreme being. This is how people misuse religion to justify their behavior. This is how people, they use this, I know more, I know better for you, so I'm doing this for your benefit. Brian's letter, there are little bits of truth thrown into an expansive manufactured story built around how great Brian is. He even says how killing Gabby was being merciful to her. This is why I'm not reading it, because it's just this manufactured story of how he was trying to control the narrative and how he was protecting himself and his inflated ego, that he wasn't really a bad person. The last thing I did want to mention on this narrative is he wrote in the suicide letter that he's killing himself because he can no longer live without Gabby. And it's not because he is afraid of prison. But that is, again, a narrative of not appearing weak and fearful, which I'm going to tell you, he had a karmic 5, and 5s are tied to freedom and to control and manipulation. And going to prison, he is not going to be able to see a way around that. I mean, that's why when they put some of these serial killers or psychopaths in prison, they will be on a suicide watch, because again, they are so used to controlling their own narrative at all costs. And that means even killing themselves if it will protect their narrative. And that is what a final narcissistic collapse is. Our best wish for the highest will and good is that justice be served in all capacity, all of the truth to come out, so that people can learn and grow from this unfortunate, tragic experience. I do want to mention, if you want to learn more about narcissism and where to get support, there are several great YouTube channels where there are experts, licensed experts. Dr. Ramani's channel, I will put some links in the description box below. Dr. Ramani is an experienced licensed psychologist. She specializes in narcissism, surviving narcissism with Dr. C. He's also a licensed therapist or psychologist, and he also deals with narcissism. I believe his daughter had been married to a narcissist for years. And then there's a channel called The Royal We, and his father was a narcissist. So he's got a lot of great experience as well. And they have a lot of ways and provide help for people who might be looking or evaluating whether they might be in this type of a very dangerous, dynamic situation. So I am going to pull a few cards from Gabby. She has this bright energy, and more from Gabby, because again, Brian is in the background and he wants to stay there because he has a lot to learn and grow from what happened to him. And that destruction of self through suicide, killing somebody in suicide, is very hard on the soul. So he has a lot to work through at this part. The learning doesn't stop because you killed yourself. It will continue on the other side. He has lessons to learn from that, and that is definitely something he is working hard on. To bring forward just a few messages from Gabby, and so the first one is ask for help. Sometimes you just need the support of somebody else because you're confused. A narcissist can make you so confused because they question your reality. They know you're false, and you know you're false. And so when when they're bringing it up, it does add validity to them, and it's so easy for them to brainwash you. And so what she what says on the card is angels are celestial beings who protect everyone. And the fairies say now is a time for you to ask for angelic assistance and for guidance. And again, ask for help is, again, like I'll put the links below to some people, that can help you. I can help you look at relationship charts to see where there may be problems. And so that can also be very helpful for people. If you're interested in that, you can go to my website. I always put that in the description box below. So next we're going to the wisdom of the oracle. And 47 is coming up. And Gabby had 4s and 7s in her chart. And it says to go the distance. And so you can see this cheetah is racing right across the sand, the dry desert. And so this is about knowing that you have the endurance to make it through something very difficult. It doesn't have to end like Gabby's ended. This is the exception to the rule. So there's lots of help out there. You can go the distance. You can come out better, happier than you ever were before, and stronger. So I want to go to the wisdom of the hidden realms. There's a little bit of that murky energy going on in this relationship. Okay, so this is the spirit whisper, and this is the number 3. And so the 3 that was in Brian's chart. Divine guidance and higher knowing. So this lady in the picture, we know at a level when we're being taken advantage of. We know when things aren't right. Sometimes our own fears get in the way, our own insecurities. And so we don't, again, reach for our own guidance, the guidance that's being provided. These 2 cards too are showing lots of green energy, and that's that heart chakra energy that Gabby had a lot of, but that Brian was struggling with, opening the heart chakra. He was shut down. Again, the distortions were great for him, and he was not seeing, clearly. But he knew, obviously, people know that what his behavior was, he knew he did something wrong, right? Because they were trying to hide it and cover it up. So there is that higher knowing that you are not on the right path. Oh, and so this is from Gabby, and this is so perfect for this reading. And this is tied to her 14-5, which is a mirror energy. What is reflecting back to you? Who or what is triggering you? And so this is meant for you to take a deeper look at that, being careful not to just always blaming others or yourself at this. Somewhere in the middle that you will be looking for the underlying. So why are you in the situation? What are you hoping to gain? Is it because it's what you've known, because you had a narcissistic parent, so you can end up in a relationship because it's comfortable, even though you know it's bad for you? So again, it's about going a little bit deeper and trying to see what is trying to tell you, what the whole situation is trying to show you and to tell you. And so I'm going to go to the archetype cards. Gabby. Oh, this is very interesting. Father attributes. So let's talk a little bit, just briefly, about Gabby. Wants to mention this. She had a 10-1 in her chart, and that is tied to the father. It's can be a very masculine energy. It's about finding the balance of the masculine and feminine within, finding that balance. But it also can be, our lessons about that can be disempowerment from the masculine. And I'm not sure how her father played in her life. But again, I know that Brian had a lot of that paternal energy in his chart, and she was very drawn to that. Okay, so what is the spiritual side of the father attribute? So it's talent for creating and supporting life positive guiding light within a tribal unit. So what are the shadow attributes? Dictator, being a dictator and having dictatorial control and abuse of authority. So we can kind of see how that father distortion was playing out in this relationship. Whether she had some issues with her own father and Brian had issues with his father, understanding what that paternal father energy and how that is supposed to protect us and support our growth in this incarnation. And that can get very distorted and obviously did in this relationship. So the last card I'm going to pull has to be from the Healing Mantra deck by Matt Kahn, because this is a deeply traumatic, disturbing for all of us. And we want to open up our hearts to anybody struggling with this. And so here is really the crux of gaining clarity for both of them, and it's grounding my energy. And the mantra is, it is safe to be in my body. So let's go to grounding my energy. When your energy is grounded, you are no longer wrestling with the pain of the past or chasing after potential future outcomes. You dare to demonstrate your very best attributes and qualities, no matter how you are perceived or received by others. With your energy grounded, your mind can relax as your body becomes a more enjoyable environment to inhabit. This mantra is ideal for replacing compulsive thoughts, releasing addictive behavior, and finding stability. Perfect, Gabby. Thank you so much. Let's say this 3 times for healing and to just generate it out into the ethers. It is safe to be in my body. It is safe to be in my body. It is safe to be in my body. Thank you for being here and letting me show you how the relationships between Gabby and Brian were playing out. I appreciate you being here, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.